I'm sorry, I was having some technical difficulties for a second. Okay. Okay. So the question's kind of long, but bear with me. So like during the pandemic, there were a few moratoriums that were put into place. One dealing with with eviction, and another one dealing with like utility disconnection, and that helped save like a lot of lives because people didn't have to just be out and about, and they reduced COVID deaths a lot. They potentially could have helped. Reduce it a lot throughout the nation, but there's also a thing about Medicaid that I wanted to know about. Like, what's it called? A lot of people in the United States, and Mississippi specifically, they do not have Medicare, and a lot of people have died because of it. And knowing that the Mississippi Constitution, one of the articles talks about how the political power is vested in and derived from the people, and all the government, and all of the government originates with the people and is founded upon their will and is instituted solely for the good of the people. How exactly do you square the fact that some Mississippians are dying from lack of health care while other people are able to survive it, like as well as normal because they can afford to have it?
Who goes? Yeah, I'm unmuted. Is that for me?
Yes,
okay.
That's for you, Mr. President.
Sorry, I just said that. Look, I think one of the top things I've talked about in this campaign has been about Medicaid expansion and how that we've got 230,000 working people, many of whom you're talking about that really suffered the most in the pandemic. 230,000 working people who lack access to health care right now. These are people that are sacking groceries, they're cleaning hotel rooms, they're working every day, and yet Mississippi is one of 40 states in America that has not expanded Medicaid. While we are losing billions of dollars a year, 34 hospitals are on the brink of closure. 5 hospitals have ended inpatient care, which means if you need care for more than 24 hours, you've got to go to another hospital. So we've got a healthcare crisis in the state. That's why I have said on day one that I would begin action to expand Medicaid, first by filing for the federal waivers and then working with the legislature to get Medicaid expansion passed. It is going to be a defining issue in the governor's race. It's sort of what's separating the wheat from the chaff in our race as to where folks stand on Medicaid expansion. The debate last night brought that out pretty clear. And I support expanding Medicaid for those 230,000 working Mississippians who right now don't fit in. They make too much money, quite frankly, to fit into today's Medicaid program, but they're working every day. I believe we should be able to get them health care through some form of Medicaid expansion. There are different options that are out there around the nation. Some, the private option in Arkansas, the state buys an insurance policy for those individuals. Other states administer it a different way. We'll have to work with the legislature on some of those logistics, but it's something that I want to see done. I'll point out something else on the pandemic for just a minute. Tate Reeves sent back $52 million of rental assistance funds that were aimed at people who were, you had a couple of things working. First, you had a moratorium on evictions. And because of that, many people got behind on their rent. Just because you have a moratorium on evictions doesn't mean you still don't owe the rent. And so the governor sent back $52 million of funds to the federal government that were aimed at helping those individuals that had gotten in arrears on their rent. It hurt both the renter and the landlord because both of them needed to be made whole, and he turned those dollars back. I think that was dumb, and it ended up only hurting people and getting them further in the hole.
Thank you, Mr. Presley. Olivia, did you have a second part to your question?
Yes, from that answer, you said that it's going to be something that you and the legislator are going to have to like work with. But if you had to like give an idea of what you would want in like the best case scenario, how exactly would you like develop your Medicaid expansion plan? Like, what would that look like to you?
You kind of cut out on me after the part about I'd have to work with the legislature. I'm sorry.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I know that you said that you would have to work with the state legislature to get this figured out, but if you had to like go in your best case scenario, what exactly would your Medicaid expansion plan look like?
Well, I personally support Mike Beebe is a good friend of mine, was the governor of Arkansas. Governor Beebe and them passed a private option where you could pick different health care plans. I think making sure that mental health coverage is a part of those offerings is something very important. Addiction counseling is part of those options is very important. I'm very practical about these things. And so I want to shoot straight with you. No matter what my best idea of Medicaid expansion is not going to be how it comes out of a Republican-held House and Senate. There is a majority of House and Senate members today that would vote to expand Medicaid, but the how that program looks as it goes through the process is going to be drastically different from what other states look like. I personally like the Arkansas model because it does give different options out there. It doesn't put you on the side of arguing that it's government taking over of healthcare or you would lose your private insurance. This allows for a private option. But in Arkansas, it's working. In Louisiana, it's working, where there are 400,000 Louisianans right now that are covered through healthcare. And so however we get there, whatever that vehicle looks like, as long as the results are we get health coverage to these 230,000 working Mississippians, I'm open to working with the legislature on how to get that done. As long as we're aimed at the same goal. First, getting health care to 230,000 people. Secondly, drawing down that $1 billion a year that we're losing right now. Those are the goals of mine.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Emily.
Okay. Between 2018 and 2020, there were 1,340,000 poor and low income people, accounting for 45.9% of the population. To meet their basic needs, a household with 2 adults and 2 children need to earn over $21 an hour. However, the current minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. At this wage, an individual must work 86 hours a week to afford a moderate 2-bedroom apartment. There are 571,567 people, or 45.3% of the workforce, earning less than $15 an hour. I'm a single mother who desires to provide the best possible for my children, and the reality isn't easy when Mississippi's living wage is $7.25 an hour and has been since 2009.
Your question, Emily.
My question is, do you plan to raise minimum wage? What are your thoughts on, well, not only raising minimum wage, but to a living wage, not just for one population, but for all, especially the poor and low wealth?
Yeah. Is that for me too? I'm fine.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
Presley.
All right. Yeah. I support raising the minimum wage. I've said that. One of the issues you've got, and again, I'm talking in practical terms here. I think there's support in some corners of the legislature for raising the minimum wage. Do we have it at a figure right now? No. And I don't want to tell you that somehow there's a figure that's out there, but obviously $7.25 ain't cutting it. And we need to raise the minimum wage. I've supported that, been on record supporting that. And I think it's important that we try to get that done in Mississippi. Now, the other side will argue too, well, nobody's making $7.25 an hour. Well, they are. And there are people making minimum wage. And so I would like to see it raised. And I think that there's some movement in the legislature. Heck, Tate Reeves himself even acted for a split second as if he would support a raise in the minimum wage. So something I'd like to see done for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to our the next question. This question is for Ty Pinkins. Mississippi has some of the most antiquated restrictions that restrict a person's right to vote. And a new law, harvesting ballot bill, that would place greater restrictions on Mississippi's most vulnerable voting population. How would you address the issues that arise out of these How would you address these issues that arise out of these problematic voting restriction laws?
But thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. And voting is personal to me. I'm from the Mississippi Delta, born and raised. My mother dropped out of school when she was 15 years old to give birth to me. And my father, he had left school in the 6th grade already. So throughout their lives, they've lived in the Mississippi Delta, one of the poorest areas in this state and in this country, and have had to struggle to access the ballot. And so that's why this position, Secretary of State, is so important to me. With regard to Harvard to wiping our voter rolls, the only people that should be wiped from the rolls are people who are not living anymore. That is it, point blank. In Mississippi, I think our biggest issues are that we are not following the lead of so many other states that have already implemented common sense voting expansion guidelines. Take, for example, that 41 other states have already implemented online voter registration. That's 41, not Mississippi. 47 other states have already implemented no excuse early voting, not Mississippi. Nearly half the states in this country have what's called same-day voter registration, which means if that your name is Robert Bradford Sr., and you get to the polls and they have you listed as Robert Bradford Jr., you could correct that right there on the spot on election day. Take 5 steps to the right and vote, not Mississippi. We even have states in this country, the top 10 states in voter turnout have what's called at-home voting, which means the Secretary of State of those states, those 10 states, they literally send an official ballot to every registered voter 30 days before an election so that they can sit at home, review these candidates, go to their events, question candidates, and pick who they want. And they either get an opportunity to mail those ballots back in, registered mail, drop those ballots off in a secure ballot box, or take it in and turn it in on election day. Most people choose to walk it in on election day. That proves how much that works. What I would want to do is something simple, because we are last in so many areas: healthcare, unemployment, economic development, and voting. We can go from last to first, from worst to first so quickly if we had a Secretary of State in office that did one simple thing. Actually went to these states that have 41 states that have online voter registration, the 47 that has no excuse early voting, and take those plans and implement them here in Mississippi. That's one of the benefits that we have, a weird kind of benefit that we have since we're so far behind. Every other state has done the work for us. They have already done it. So as Secretary of State, I would do something that's actually one of the Secretary of State's duties, is to research and develop policies and provide suggestions to the legislature. I would research and develop how these 41 and 47 states have already implemented these plans, take those plans, put them into some type of policy, a draft policy, provide that to the legislature. And on day one, we go from worst to first in something in Mississippi so that people will stop saying, other states will stop saying, thank God for Mississippi, because we know that's not a good thing. They always say, thank God for Mississippi, because we're behind in so many things. But in this instance, we can become first just like that. So for me, my focus is on implementing online voter registration, no excuse early voting, same-day voter registration, supporting the overturning of Mississippi's felony disenfranchisement laws, which we know were implemented specifically, not only specifically, expressly for racist purposes. So supporting the overturning of those ballot laws, and last but not least, and especially, probably most importantly, reinstituting Mississippi's ballot initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkins. Okay, Olivia, it's back to you.
Okay, I had a quick question for Miss Greta Kemp Martin, for the Attorney General. Okay, so recently, 6 law enforcement officers were involved and arrested for the unjustifiable heinous acts against 2 Black males that resided in Rankin County. The case is being prosecuted by the Department of Justice, but a lot of these crimes happen with law enforcement like really frequently in Mississippi, and they're really prevalent in Black and poor and low-income communities. How would you address this issue that often is not addressed or prosecuted by the state of Mississippi? And also, a lot of the things that happen with these forms of misconduct are actually codified and enshrined in the law in Mississippi and other places in the United States. How would you go about to make those seem more equitable and fair so this misconduct doesn't happen as much?
Yes, thank you for the question, Olivia. Law enforcement is a very deep part of my life. I'm the daughter of a law enforcement officer and the granddaughter of 2 law enforcement officers, and my uncle was also a law enforcement officer. So that is something that is very deeply rooted in my family history. My father still to this day puts on a badge every morning and goes out, and he's chief of police of the city of Tishomingo. So your question's important because what we have right now in the Attorney General's office is someone who is lazy. She is not fulfilling her duties to the people of Mississippi, and this is one of those areas where she has sat by and let our federal government come in and tell her when she needs to do her job. Those 6 officers, that was one of the most brutal instances of police misconduct that I have ever read, and I used to prosecute police misconduct cases when I was in private practice. And our Attorney General sat back and waited for our federal government to step in and indict those 6 officers, despite the fact that one of the victims' mothers stood outside her office for a full day begging for justice. And that is probably one of the most horrific things I have ever seen, and certainly will stick with me for a very long time. And what we have put out on our platform with regards to law enforcement is trying to push for policies for body-worn cameras. We think that should be a requirement across the state of Mississippi. I've spoken with law enforcement across the state of Mississippi who also believe that this should be a requirement and that their agencies should be given the resources to have those body-worn cameras. It protects the community. It protects the police officer. And look, my father and I, we've talked about this extensively, and one thing that we agree on is there's nothing that good cops hate more than bad cops. It truly puts public trust at risk when we have officers like the 6 in Rankin County that have brutalized members of our community. And for a while seemingly got away with it. We now know that many of those 6 officers have been subject to multiple disciplinary sanctions over the years. As a matter of fact, one of those officers is Brett McAlpin. I sued him in 2011 for something very similar to what he did to these 2 gentlemen in Rankin County. I mean, this has been going on for over a decade. Certainly, I believe the AG's office should take a stronger position in ensuring that the policies and procedures in these agencies protect our communities. I think that we have people in state leadership, including my opponent, that feels like if they come down too hard on the law enforcement community, they're going to be seen as anti-law. They're going to be too woke. Well, there is a delicate balance that can be walked between being an ally for law enforcement and ensuring they have the resources they need, but also understanding that we have to provide oversight to these agencies when they come into our communities and do wrong things. I mean, this is common knowledge and this is common sense. And as the daughter of a police officer, I want our law enforcement to have every resource they need. We ask police officers to do much more than police. We ask them to be domestic violence counselors. We ask them to be marriage counselors, social workers, mental health workers. My father will tell you that policing today is nothing like it was 40 years ago when he first joined the force. And we have to adhere our training and resources to our ever-changing communities. And in a state where we have failing mental health care, we have to equip our officers with the things that they are going into the communities and seeing. And look, when police officers do bad things, they need to be held accountable. Our law enforcement officers cannot be immune to accountability if they commit crimes, period. And I will tell you that it's my position when I win Attorney General, we're going to ensure that not only do police officers have the resources they need, and that includes crisis intervention training that will prepare them for some of these situations they find themselves in, but we're also going to work with local law enforcement agencies and county sheriffs to ensure that their policies and procedures keep our communities safe, because that is what our officers are here to do. And I say that, like I said, as a daughter of a police officer, as well as a Mississippian. I want our law enforcement officers to be safe so they come home to their families every night. But I also want to make sure that our law enforcement officers aren't the reason that somebody doesn't come home to theirs. And that's the way it should be. So thank you for that question, Olivia. Law enforcement is certainly something that's very personal to me, and it will be a top priority for our administration.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have any other questions, Olivia?
Kind of. Okay, so hold on, you guys can still hear me? Okay. Um, you said something about like the police officers having to do a lot more than they were to have to do 40 years ago with being like intervening in like domestic situations and like being mental health counselors and everything. Could you see yourself supporting like a division of this so then they don't have to do that, so you don't bring people who are like prepared to like fight or like what's it called, escalate situations
Yeah.
into things that don't necessarily need it? And secondly, well, yeah, that's the question that I have right now.
No, and that's a great question, because I do think that we have to ensure that officers have training, like I said, that changes with our ever-changing communities, and to learn those de-escalation techniques. Look, the de-escalation techniques that worked back 40 years ago, they don't work these days. We have found those to be ineffective and honestly violent. So we need to ensure that we have the appropriate training for officers to learn those techniques. And that's what goes hand in hand with crisis intervention. But moreover, we have to put resources into our mental health system, period. And that comes right along with expansion of Medicaid. We have a crumbling mental health care system, and that goes hand in hand with our crumbling healthcare system. Because we are asking officers to do things like social work and mental health, because these individuals have nowhere to go in their community to get the community mental health care that they need. So these things all play in together. We elect Brandon Presley as governor, we get Medicaid expansion, and we see an improvement in our mental health care system. These things all tie together, and that way law enforcement is not forced to, become mental health care workers when they are trying to intervene. They have people to call that can come out and help them de-escalate situations, who have the training, mental health care workers who have the training that they need to ensure that people get the help that they need.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next panelist is Rabbi Kassoff, and her question is for DeKeither Stamps for Public Service Commissioner.
Thank you, Emily. Good evening, everyone. I am Rabbi Deborah Kassoff. I'm a regional organizer for Working Together Mississippi, and I serve as the spiritual leader of Hebrew Union Congregation in Greenville, Mississippi. Mr. Stamps, as I know you know, Mississippians suffer from chronic shortfalls of safe and clean drinking water, electricity, and broadband services. And these problems are particularly impactful and in some cases most acute in the Mississippi Delta, which is the poorest area in the state. So my question is, how would you address these challenging infrastructure problems in Mississippi, given that this is a situation that's built up over decades of neglect?
Well, Robert, thank you for that question, and thank you for hosting everyone for hosting this town hall, because it's very important. This question strikes at the very core of why I'm running for Public Service Commissioner, because the major difference between first world countries and third world countries is utilities. Access to clean drinking water, not having proper ways to evacuate sewer and wastewater from your community, not having access to natural gas services, for instance. All these things add to a better quality of life, and it reduce the cost of living. So when it comes to the utility space, we can do so much to lift people out of poverty in the utility space, because everyone gets a utility bill. But if your services aren't adequate, let's say you don't have dependable electrical systems in your area or dependable drinking water, you're paying more because now you're buying drinking water from Walmart when you could use it from the tap. So this is an additional cost laid on to poor people when they don't have adequate drinking water and adequate other utilities. You end up purchasing them. Like right now, people are buying these Generac generators and financing them because the electrical system isn't as reliable as it should be. People shouldn't have to do that in a first world country. They shouldn't have extra cost added to their lives because they don't have quality basic utility services. Even in the Delta, as you know, there are people who still have outhouses today in 2023 in not just the Delta, but there's many of them in the Delta, but across Mississippi, this is the case. So what we're going to do as your public service commissioner for the Central District is we're going to work with every utility provider, whether they be a municipal utility or one of the other utility providers, to push for more access and clean lines of water, sewer, and natural gas, and also the expansion of renewable energy across the whole state so that we can get our costs down and provide better services for citizens. And as a byproduct, it's gonna open up more avenues for economic development across the state, because businesses do not go to areas where you don't have quality water, quality sewer, natural gas is how you keep manufacturing plants, cell phone service, and broadband. Those 5 pillars are the pillars to having a stable community and maintaining the property values in our communities across the state. So those are the things that we're going to push for so that we can provide better service to our citizens.
Thank you, Mr.
If I may, I didn't know if there was time for a follow-up question, Emily.
We actually need to keep going forward.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
You can
Mr.
reach out to me
Shams.
offline, ma'am, if you have a question.
Thank
Right.
you.
I'll put my contact info in the chat.
Okay, the next question is for Larry Bradford for State Auditor. The state of Mississippi has been in the national news as it relates to the theft of TANF funds. Funds allocated for those who are living in extreme poverty and in desperate need of services. It's critical to have checks and balances in place to ensure this kind of historical TANF never takes place in the state of Mississippi. What policies would you implement to safeguard resources for poor and low income residents in the state of Mississippi? I think you're on mute, Larry.
You're on mute, Mr. Bradford.
I just tried to unmute him. There, Mr. Bradford. He's on mute.
We're going to come back to Mr. Bradford. Emily, if you'll move on to Brad Bradford. Mr. Brad Bradford.
I'm going to pass it to Francine for this question.
Francine. Emily, proceed to ask the question.
Sure. So this question is for Brad Bradford for Agriculture Commissioner. There is a lack of diversity and inclusion in Mississippi when it relates to Black farmers and low resources farmers. There have been many instances Black farmers and low resource farmers are not included in receiving information on services and resources offered through the Department of Agriculture. What mechanisms would you put in place to make sure Black farmers and low resource farmers are included? Mississippi continues to face suits filed by poor and Black farmers because the resources are not fairly distributed. How will you dismantle the gap between the haves and the have-nots so that federal programs can help us what we need help with the most?
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks, Emily, for that great question. Being a 4th generation farmer, myself from the Mississippi Delta, understanding the poorest region in the state of Mississippi. It hits home because I've seen my father go through the same thing back when we was growing up on our farm. My platform is simple. It's the whole community. We have to take care of the whole community in agriculture. We know agriculture is the #1 industry in this great state, but we know there's a disparity. There's some segregation amongst African-American farmers. So my plan is simple. Once elected, we're going to go in because the Commission of Agriculture have 8 divisions that falls up under him. And in those divisions, there are a community organization that's supposed to go out and reach out to our local farmers and make sure they're getting the adequate information being handed down. The problem is, as I always state, we have currently the Fox Garden Hen House leadership now, because he's our current agriculture commissioner is attorney. He knows nothing about agriculture, so he don't understand the importance of making sure the whole community gets all the resources. As an African American, I've witnessed discrimination. I've seen segregation firsthand. So what we're going to do, day one going in, I'm going to challenge all my divisions inside the Department of Agriculture and Commerce, because it needs to look like Mississippi. Right now, we don't have that because it's political right now. And there's no political in agriculture because we all play a vital part in that. So I'm going to challenge each of those directors to make sure we include everyone down to the lowest level, because a lot of federal funds comes from the United States Department of Agriculture. And don't get me wrong, a lot of those farmers can reach out directly to the federal program. But being an emergency manager in 25 years United States military, I know the importance of great leadership. Your agency are only going to be great as your leader. And if you have a leader that's not compassionate, don't have the understanding of farming and the whole community, it's going to show as we have today. So I'm going to really reach out to our local small farmers and really try to get them into the limelight, because we have to. I believe in the small farmers first. As an agriculture guy graduating from the Alcorn State University, I understand the importance of agriculture and making sure our individuals, we're planning things to make this state a valuable resource. Right now, we only have one portion of the state that's benefiting from it because they're friends and they're getting the jump on it. And we're going to change that. We're going to put a lot of training inside the organization if elected. We're going to make sure people understand diversity, inclusion, and equity. That training is very important when we're talking about minority farmers being the last at getting things, because as Ty said it, Mississippi is known to be last. That's a leadership problem. We have to have great leadership in these positions to make sure everyone is taken care of. And my leadership plan states that we're going to use the whole community. We're going to make sure that information is getting down, and we're going to use my method is called cradle to the grave. That means if anybody want to get in farm or small farmers, we're going to work with them till they get to the finish line. We're not just going to pass information off to them and let them suffer for themselves and try to figure it out. And that's what we have to be. And if we look at that and make sure our agency mirrors Mississippi, I think we can alleviate a lot of this segregation, a lot of this discrimination in the Mississippi Delta among our African-American farmers.
Francine, did you want to address the question to Mr. Bradford?
Yes, thank you. So part of the question for me as a Black farmer and also as a veteran, so it was nice to hear you say that, we're not considered veteran after 10 years. And I don't understand why that is. And I would love it if someone could answer that question for us moving forward. Maybe you can't answer it tonight. But the other part of this is the resources that are available. They're federal resources. And my question is, why is it, or how would you make sure that everybody was aware of those resources when they become available? Because right now, those who need it the most don't get that information. Those who have the most seem to always get that information. We always miss the deadlines, or, oh, that was last season. So we find out about it way, way too late. And my question again is, how would you address that? Right,
we're going to address that because I understand the grant system. You know, you got your U.S., you got your state resources down to the lowest level. As a ag commissioner, I'm going to make sure we be a sub-recipient of those grants where we can directly affect our minority farmers. Right now, what we have is we have, like I said, we have the Fox Garden Hen House method. That means the fox know what's coming out. So he's going to alert everything for his friends to get a jump on it and not get down to the lowest level. We're going to change a lot of things once, if elected. I know the Department of Agriculture uses a lot of money for rodeos. Rodeos don't feed people. We need to take that money and put it into our small farmers, getting them started, because my plan calls for this. If you start off as a small farmer, my vision is here, a couple of years, you should start moving up the ladder and make room for others. So that's what we're going to do, because a lot of large farmers, they started out small. So we're going to make sure every small farmer has that same opportunity, and we're going to classify them from moving to small up to intermediate to large, because if you're growing, that makes room for a lot of agriculture. And Mississippi has enough resources here to be self-sustainable, but we got to have the right leader, the right visionary to understand that we got to take care of the roots. The leaves may be green and the flowers pretty, but a lot of times people forget about the roots. The roots are the small people at the bottom, and that's what I'm gonna put all my nutrients at, in the bottom, to make sure they benefit, and also the whole entire state of Mississippi benefits agriculture-wise.
Thank you.
You. We're going to get back to the question for Larry Bradford. Would you like for me to repeat the question, or do you want to just pick up?
Yes, repeat the question, Emily.
Okay, so the question is, the state of Mississippi has been in the national news as it relates to the theft of TANF funds. Funds allocated for those who are living in extreme poverty and in desperate need of services. It's critical to have checks and balances to ensure this kind of historical TANF never takes place in the state of Mississippi. What policies would you implement to safeguard resources for poor and low-income residents in the state of Mississippi? We're unable to hear you, Mr. Bradford.
You're unmuted. You can talk now, Mr. Bradford. Mr. Bradford?
Unfortunately,
He's
you're having
unmuted.
technical,
Yeah.
no problem. He's having technical difficulties. Mr. Bradford, if we can't get you your audio, we're just going to have to move forward, and hopefully you can visit us another time.
Okay, at this time, we have a call to action with Reverend Dr. Liz Theo.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can
All
hear
right,
you.
good deal.
Great.
I'm sorry. I guess this vehicle kept picking up. I'm sorry. First of all, good evening. And thank you guys for hosting this platform and making sure that everyone is informed. I'm not sure if the system is broken, or if the people who are actually integrated or assigned to watch over the system, if they're broken. And what I mean is that they're not enforcing the guidelines that are already there. So I'm not sure if we have to reinvent the wheel there or not. What I do understand based on my discovery is that the guidelines are very relaxed as it relates from the federal coming down to the state. It's very relaxed, but from the state to the recipients, they've made it very difficult for them to actually get. So we definitely want to go in and we want to revisit those policies and those statutes that surround that, and make sure that it's user-friendly and that people who need temporary assistance are able to get it. So we'll revisit those policies and make sure that we have the right checks and balances in place. When it comes to checks and balances, we've got to make sure that there's a synchronicity. When you have synchronicity and everything is moving in a harmonious way, anytime that it's not working or not a win situation for everyone involved, then it throws off the rhythm of everything else, which makes it easy if you know how to actually implement checks and balances that feed into each other, where one has to feed into the other one. And if it's not actually, and if there's no synchronicity, then it makes troubleshooting a whole lot easier. And we know how to go directly to the problem, and we know how to see what the problem is. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is making sure that we have citizenship engagement, that we will keep the auditor's office open from where individuals are able to come in, open door policy, Monday through Friday, and we'll be able to hear it, because there's no way that we would know that the system is not working if individuals who apply for welfare or temporary assistance don't let us know. The agencies, by the time it gets to the agencies, and then it gets back to actually gets to the auditor's office, it'll probably be too late. And the help that they needed, they probably would not have gotten, and in the manner that we're going to move to make sure that it happens. We're also going to have a 24-hour hotline. And a 24-hour hotline would mean that they'll be able to actually call, and we'll fill those calls, and we'll make sure that line is manned, and that every individual actually is attended to. We want to make sure that there's no family left behind. Now, I know that takes a lot of manpower, and I know that it'll take individuals manning that, but I would rather but anytime you're coming in behind a broken, fragmented system that people are literally merchandising and have created the slush fund, and it's amazing how people will how the wealthy continue to get broken. Efficient and regular, then the mechanic goes out of business to find another broken. And the more things get to fall through the loop, the more that we don't have the right checks and balances, the right the right filters to actually catch it. So we'll actually have those things in place. I believe personally that's low-hanging fruit, and that we'll be able to remedy that real quickly. We were at Hobnob, and the incumbent was saying how in 5 years, how his office has recovered more than any other administration. In 5 years, they recovered $70 million. Well, I plan on recovering $77 million. The money, the welfare money, we'll get that back at our first 100 days. We'll make sure that we're implementing the right instruments to safeguard the TANF money that comes down from the federal government. And we'll make sure that we work on the federal level to make sure that there's a check and balance, that actually, and there's a protocol as it relates to what our responsibility is, even with them. And I think that has to be recognized, that has to be structured in the right way. So absolutely. And we look forward to getting it done.
Thank you, Mr.
Did I answer successfully? I got some more if you want some more now.
No, that's it.
I got some more. If we go back and look at pattern recognition, if we pull the balance sheets, if we pull the P&L statements and all the disbursements, and if and our office, actually our brokers, we've already been combing through it from an appropriation standpoint, and what actually comes down from the federal government, we've already went through it. We actually have combed through those disbursements and those balance sheets to match receipts all the way back to when Phil Bryant was actually a state auditor. And let me just say that the mismanagement and the malfeasance didn't start in 2016. Let me say that to you. And we're going to make sure that we hold those individuals accountable. We're going to make sure that we put trust. We're going to make sure that there's integrity, and we're going to make sure that that all Mississippians can sleep well at night, knowing if there's ever a need for TANF, they got it.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford.
If you need some more, I got it. I'm locked and loaded.
We appreciate that.
If you want me to back that ag up, I can do that next.
No, sir.
Sir, thank you.
Move on. Yeah.
Okay. At this time, we're going to move to the next portion, a call to action with Reverend Dr. Liz Theo here as one of our co-chairs.
Okay, now I can't hear you guys.
So we're going to move to our next portion, a call to action with one of our co-chairs, Dr. Reverend Liz Theo Harris.
Well, thank you so much, Emily, and thanks for everyone for joining. As Emily said, my name is Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris. I am the national co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for
If
more,
someone is talking, I can't hear them talking.
alongside of the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. And it is an honor to be here at this important candidates forum this evening, having a chance to hear from impacted folk across Mississippi who have questions for those that are running for elected office in the state. As we've heard already this evening, there is a crisis of poverty, of the lack of health care, of small farming. There is a crisis happening in Mississippi. But as we've also heard, people are coming together to, as we say in the Poor People's Campaign, wake the sleeping giant of poor and low income voters who have the power in their hands, in their votes, to shift the entire political calculus of this country and of the state of Mississippi. Poverty and low wages are too great in Mississippi. But what we also know is that poverty is a policy choice, and that it reflects both low wages and the high cost of living, and that this makes it hard for us to meet our basic needs. The fact that in Mississippi there were more than 1,340,000 poor and low income people, 45.9% of the population. Now, this is immoral and unjust, and we need to do something about it. What we know in Mississippi, that the kind of pandemic relief policies were temporarily lifting the load of poverty, but they have ended too soon. With 632,000 kids in 396,000 households receiving the expanded child tax credit, only to lose it when it was not extended. And this is immoral and it's wrong. We know that in Mississippi, the crisis of healthcare that we talked about already this evening is great. 339,000 people are uninsured, including in the most intense parts of the pandemic. And what we also know is that climate change and ecological devastation are wreaking havoc on the lives and livelihoods of people in Mississippi. The democracy of this great nation in Mississippi is under attack. There have been 36 voter restrictive bills introduced just in the last 3 years, and they aren't stopping. But we are also not stopping, and we're going to continue to organize and mobilize and register and educate and empower and engage people for a movement that votes. And we're going to turn out in the election this week. We are going to be there and strong, because again, we know that in Mississippi, do you know that there's more than 1 million poor and low income voters? That's a third of the electorate. It's in some places 40% of the electorate. And we have the power, with just some more people who haven't heard their name, who haven't heard their condition, who have poisoned water coming out of their taps, are those family farmers that cannot catch a break, are the folks that have lost too many people because of the lack of Medicaid expansion and the lack of health care. In a country that spends more on healthcare than anywhere else. And so we, the poor and low income folk that are this sleeping giant, are going to turn up and turn out. And that's what this candidates forum is about. That's what the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign is all about. And what we talk about in this campaign, and what we organize to make a reality in our lives and in our communities, is that we are going to make poverty and low wages and systemic racism and ecological devastation and the denial of health care and the war economy that prioritizes prisons and border patrol and militarism over the lives of people and families and kids and babies. And we're going to say, we're going to move forward together and not one step back. we're going to put into office folk that actually talk about the kinds of issues that make a difference for the people of Mississippi and make a difference for the people across this great nation. And so, you know, folk are ready. We have been reaching out and canvassing. We have been door knocking. We've been texting, and we are having a powerful impact, because we know that this fusion movement of people like who have been represented tonight. You know, you got a Jewish rabbi and a Black farmer, you know, here having a chance to raise questions, the folks that want to represent the state of Mississippi and want to be able to, you know, meet the needs of the people of Mississippi. And so we're going to keep on building that movement, and we're going to keep on insisting that it does not have to be this way. It is not as good as it gets. And we indeed can organize our society. We can lift from the bottom so that everybody rises. And we can indeed, as we say in the Poor People's Campaign, move forward together and not one step back.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. Thank you to our co-chair, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo-Harris, and in the absence of our other co-chair, Reverend Dr. William Barber II. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us on tonight, but we bring you greetings from both of our co-chairs. And again, listeners, this is the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign presenting to you tonight the statewide candidate town hall meeting. To find more about the Poor People's Campaign, go to www.poorpeoplescampaign.org and sign up to join the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign, or wherever you are across this country, you can sign up to join your state by, again, going to www.poorpeoplescampaign.org. God bless you and have a great night. We look forward to seeing everyone on August the 2nd, November 7th at the polls from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We are voter fatigued, voter tired. We're tired in Mississippi, y'all. So that's why I'm stumbling. But thank you so much. And we say forward together, not one step back.
One step back.